Beast Stalker, Giant Stalker, Dragon Stalker, Crypt Stalker, Demon Stalker, Rift Stalker, Grom Stalker, Crypt Stalker, Scourge Stalker, Wind Runner, I'm a pony, Elite Skill Hunter. A Death Dealer, Life Stealer, that's just the cost of being awesome.
Welcome to episode 194 of the Hunting Party Podcast. I'm Arth from the Warcraft Hunters Union.
And I'm not Dark Brew. See, from Dark Brew Hall and Dark Brew on Twitter.
And I'm Alexander from the Hunting Party Podcast with mic issues this week.
Today is Saturday, November 16th, 2013. If you want to participate in the chat room and have your name mangled or read on the air, just create a cool Huntry Warlord name and join the fun.
Yes, and speaking of the chat room today, we are joined by Bazog, BM Jaeger, Druid Tamer, Exploding Kitties, Faramus, Flint, Gobow, Havtor, Induates, Lakey, McPherson, Oxander, Saria, Slugslinger, and Zero Miss. Our lovely moderator, as always, is the microphonally challenged Ollie Sonder. You can send your questions in to Ollie in a private message by left-clicking her name, selecting PM, then typing in the new tab, or if you're not listening to the show live, you can send your questions to huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com, and we will try to get to it on a future show. We have a couple quick announcements. And the first is that Dark Brew, as you may have noticed from the intro that did not include him, is out this week. He's also out next week. We do have a guest on this week, and we're going to have at least one guest on next week. We don't have that set in stone, but I'm still talking to some people, and we will have a Cavalcade of Coolness for you set up next week as well. He will be back on I think that next weekend is the 30th, and that's when we're tentatively hoping on bringing Roger Brown from Method to the podcast. This is like the third time we've tried to have him on, but he wants to be on, and we think this is going to work out with our schedules. But joining us today, we have Flint, and you did hear him in the intro trying out Dark Brew's lines. Flint is a longtime Warcraft Hunters Union hunter. He's been playing since, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but he's been playing since vanilla, raiding since BC. He's taken part in the all-hunter raiding that we did in Cataclysm when we downed a bunch of current expansion bosses. He was at. I've actually met I've actually met Flint IRL at the WHU barbecues that Frostheim used to have, and he's also sort of been an unofficial advisor to me on the WHU for several articles that I've written. Most recently, I featured some of his ideas in the Hunter Project. He and I collaborated on some ideas for that. So, Flint, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So I was glad to have you on, and I'm glad that I don't have to, Ollie and I don't have to carry the show entirely this week. I mentioned this on Twitter a couple hours ago, but I think you just got Synth just wrote in the chat room. I think you just got your show title, Cavalcade of Coolness. I like it. I think that should be the show title for this week. But I mentioned on Twitter that I believe this is the first show in the history of the Hunting Party Podcast that doesn't have either Dark Brew, Frostheim, or Euripides. Ollie, maybe you can confirm that for me. You've been around longer than I have with this.
I think that's probably right, now that you mention it.
Yeah.
It was always one or the other. Even the time we only had Frostheim, but...
Right, I remember Frost doing a show by himself one time, and that's not unheard of. Big Red Kitty used to do, if he didn't have a guest, like he was the host. It was his show. So it's not unheard of for someone to do that, but it was always some combination of them. So this is the first chance for the B team, I guess, to to take over the podcast. But of course, I've been doing this for a little while. Ollie's been doing it for longer than me, and Flint is a longtime listener and reader. So this is not new territory for him. But anyway,
normally if we didn't have all the hosts, we just canceled. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad we were able to do it this week, so we don't have to miss a bunch of weeks. Since, in terms of like regular host, Dark and I have been, with just two of us, it's a little bit harder sometimes. But Flint, tell us a little bit about yourself, like your history in WoW, what you've played, what you're currently playing, that sort of thing.
Okay, well, you're right. I have been around since vanilla. Did do raiding in BC. Started about the time the top guilds were getting into Black Temples when I started raiding. I got pulled in as a hunter. Was Horde side. Don't blame me, but I was. And
no one in
I
the
actually
chat
got-
room is going to blame you for being Horde. Well, maybe not the chat room. No one in the hangout here in the actual podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
So-
the Horde.
Yeah, played Horde for a long time, and actually got involved in a high-end raid guild, very progressive guild. Was going for world first. I'm not going to mention that guild; they're no longer around, and but some people know who they are. Went pretty far with them, raided with them during BC Wrath, and then right before Wrath, I quit raiding. Right before Kata came out, I quit raiding. Did not like Kata at all, and
Yeah,
kinda
you
got
weren't,
really-
you weren't alone. Yeah, you weren't alone. I know you were still playing, but
Yeah.
not necessarily seriously raiding.
no, I actually turned. That's when I started turning to soloing, doing some extreme soloing, and all hunter raiding was during Kata, and that's basically what I do now. And I've since gotten other tunes besides hunters. I have 5 hunters, and then I have yeah, and I have
Awesome.
a poly, and a druid that I keep trying to tame. It's just not working yet. So
Wow.
that's basically my WoW history.
You'll get there.
I'd like to give a quick shout out if I may. I want to give a shout out to my friend Ella, who really, really told me I need to do this, and to the guild that I'm working with and kind of helping build is on Nomerkin. It's Overpromise, Underdeliver, which is a great name for a guild.
Considering what a lot of guilds end up doing, yeah, that's not the worst name in the world for a guild. So, yeah, awesome. Now you have done a lot with like the WHU guild. I know there's not as much going on with that, but and also you're soloing. What are some like recent things that you've attempted or been interested in or been following? It might not even be your own achievements.
Well, obviously I watch all the really good soloers out there. There's some guys out there that are, Carlsbad, guy's insane good. Still watching those guys do their soloing. But I'm working on heroics right now. A little slow. I don't raid, so I'm in LFR gear.
Sure.
And still I'm kind of doing the heroics. Some of them are a little easier than others.
Now is this
and
is this Kata heroics or is this heroics in Mist of Pandaria?
Oh no, it's current. It's Mist.
Okay, Mist of Pandaria. Okay, Mist of Pandaria
definitely
heroics.
current heroics. Yeah, I mean it's the Kata heroics. Come on, let's face it. The gear we have now, they're cake.
I've seen people soloing Kata bosses at this point, so yeah, I suppose that would be a little bit too easy. So yeah, that's interesting. It's been a little while since I've really dug into the soloing aspect. Like at times on the WHU, I've sort of looked up the different achievements that people have been doing recently to see what the cutting edge is. So, but I haven't done that for a little while, especially in I think it's been like since the beginning of Myst I did something like that. So it's interesting to see that definitely if you're able to do some of this in, like you said, just LFR gear, that in absolute cutting edge gear, there's going to be a lot of heroics and encounters that we could definitely solo.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking that we're going to see some raid bosses going down soloed pretty soon.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll be interested to see which ones those are because I know there's a lot of unavoidable damage in this expansion. Not even a particular tier of content, and that seems to be one of the bigger drawbacks is how are you going to mitigate all that when in past expansions there was a lot of bosses where you could avoid the majority of damaging abilities, and that's not necessarily the case anymore.
Yeah, and that's what I think it's gonna hold, extreme soloers back. That plus, taunt or growl/taunt still being broken.
Right.
That's a big issue.
Well, you and I have both talked about this. I know it's a hot button issue with you, and I've talked a lot about fixing pet tanking and soloing primarily with pet abilities that aren't working quite as they should, and taunt has been one of the big ones. And I know they turned growl away from a taunt into something else, but it's still been sort of sporadically implemented. It doesn't work like it should or like the tooltip says it will on all bosses. So that's something we're still working for and hoping to get a true taunt, not just the fake one that we've had that doesn't really work on raid bosses. So that would be a huge boon to soloing and other hunter endeavors as well. And I think they're moving in the right direction, but they're still not there yet.
Yeah, I think they are.
Okay. Now we're gonna get into. We do have some updates. There hasn't been a whole lot of new hunter news this week from the expansion, but there was so much coming out of BlizzCon that we didn't cover it all last week, and we can talk about it in new ways this week if it's some of the same stuff. But I want to get your thoughts real quickly on. You saw the giant info dump coming out of BlizzCon. What were your thoughts, good or bad, about what we're seeing with the game or with hunters in particular?
Well, my main hunter is a Draenei, so going back to Draenor, to me, just absolutely awesome. Especially the whole Black Temple being the center city for the Horde.
Right.
I mean, for the Alliance, sorry. So I think it's great, actually. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. I think that they're getting back to some old lore, and I think that's awesome. I'd like to see it end, though, that expansion end, with the invasion of the Burning Legion.
There's been a lot of theories. That's I don't know if I've heard that one, but I mean that's certainly a possibility.
Actually, what I'm holding out for is the breakup of the world by Deathwing. I think that would be kind of cool.
Oh, so like the original breakup of the world by Deathwing, not the Cataclysm one.
Right, of Draenor.
I actually preferred Dark Brew's crazy time travel theory last week, where he said we come out of the dark portal at the end of the expansion, and we're back in like current post-Cataclysm, post-Mists of Pandaria, and like Arthas is standing there saying, "Hi guys, how's it going?" And everyone collectively goes, "Oh my God, what did we do?" So I think something like that would be hilarious, but I also think that's much less likely than anything you guys have just mentioned. But yeah, there's a lot of different places they could take it, and they have said we don't want this to be the time travel expansion. Don't think too hard about some of the implications. We just want you to go back and explore the old content and some of these historic either names or settings from the Warcraft games that we haven't been able to explore. That's their main focus, not necessarily where it's going. But I think they do have a sense, and they did say that this will lead into the next expansion. So I think there will be some sort of repercussions, or we might see something at the end of this that ties into the lore. But that's actually a convenient segue. Before we jump into some of the news and notes about Warlords of Draenor that we've called together this week, I wanted to introduce a new segment, because last week I don't think was enough, titled Ollie's Lore Shenanigans. Because we had a question last week that I know you wanted to get to, and we didn't have time. And there was also an email that you sent to Dark and I, and a few others as well, this week that I didn't quite understand, but you seemed quite excited about. And I wanted to know what it was that you were excited about, because it sounded like it might be something potentially very interesting to what's going on in WOD.
Well, what it was is I decided to go back and do old BC stuff that I kind of haven't done and get my lore master. And so I was starting out in Hellfire Peninsula, just kind of doing the quests I hadn't done yet on Horde side. And I got to the Orcs encampment that they have up on the south side. And there's a quest there that'll take you to attack the other Orc encampment that's nearby with all the palisades and stuff, where the Alliance gets to go do a bunch of quests as well.
Sure.
And one of the quests that I picked up at the Horde thing takes you over to the ruined castle, which is called the Armory. And there's a bunch of ghosts there that were a detachment from the ones that were sent through. And you're supposed to make contact with them. They've got a book, and there's a diary one of them wrote, and has just kind of kept it up, and they want to recruit the ghosts and things like that. And so that's cool. But then I got to thinking that what if this armory was like intact at the time, and how would that work with everything? And maybe we could go and and when the orcs originally invaded the armory and destroyed it and made it into the ruined castle with all the ghosts, that maybe this could be something that we would be dealing with. And then after I wrote my very enthusiastic email about this and thought about it, I realized that would require us to have gone through the thing and built the armory in the first place, which we hadn't done yet because we haven't been here. So I'm foiled. But I was so happy for like a day.
Yeah, you could feel the joy through your words. So I'm sorry it got I'm sorry it got ruined for you. There was something having to do with Karazhan, a new effect that Blizzard like added to the code this week, and there was a bunch of speculation on that. I'm gonna have to look into it and see what some of the theories around it were, because I remember you bringing up Karazhan last week, saying that you could enter Karazhan at one point in time and come out at a different point because it was like a time nexus.
Yes.
So like you might have actually been onto something with that. There are some subtle hints that they might be doing something along those lines.
That would be nice. I don't want them to revamp Karazhan because I love Karazhan, but going back there would be kind of cool.
Yeah, like if it's still there, like if they turned it into a dungeon or something, I think that'd be awesome.
Well, they still got that one wing, the blood altar or the blood hall or something, the upside down room that we're in theory not able to get to, but people have.
Yeah, so maybe they'll make it sort of generally accessible. Yeah, who knows? There's so many cool things they can do with that, and so many people loved the lore in BC. So yeah, I think there's a lot of fun stuff that could happen. So the other sort of tangential lore question it was an anonymous listener submitted this last week. Wanted to know what you think Anduin's role might be in the next expansion. And I don't know how into lore you are, Flint, but if you have any ideas here as well. I know of Anduin. I did some quest lines with him and stuff, but like I don't know how he fits into the bigger picture here.
Well, I don't think any of us know anything about what Anduin's going to be doing, except maybe his father, and I'm not sure even he has a very good handle on Anduin. But if you think about it, he has no wife, he has no other heir, and this kid is it. If this kid dies, and if Varian dies, which is, possible, they're like the glue that holds the whole alliance together. And so, in theory, this kid shouldn't be going anywhere. He should be sitting at home in the castle, learning to be a king and all that. And I don't think he's going to sit still for that, but I don't think that... I mean, he is the heir. So that's what you do with heirs, is you don't let them go out and be in danger.
Right.
He's only in danger of cataclysm because, he got caught up in it before anybody could stop him.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of sons who are running around the world doing things, Deathwing's son with the legendary quest as well. I didn't actually finish my legendary quest in Mist of Pandaria, but wasn't that supposedly going somewhere past this expansion? Like,
That's my understanding, but I don't know.
Yeah, but it seems odd that like you would think his thoughts would be towards the future, and if this is sort of messing with the past, I don't know if he'll really play a role in it or not, but it'll be interesting to see how they pull that in as well.
Well, he may think that he's enhancing his future by altering his past, because he is the only black dragon.
Yeah.
So if he goes back to older things...
Dragons and their time shenanigans.
Yeah, and so if he went back to the old BC with Garrosh, which is something that I have heard rumored, is that he's the one that does it, that they, if he can stop the dragons from all being wiped out, or at least save some of the eggs or something like that, or maybe stop Draenor, or stop his father from, messing everything up twice, maybe he thinks that he can, get things a little bit better this time around for him. I don't know.
Yeah, but he might be behind the scenes or something, so...
Well, there's actually a lot going on Draenor, because there's Ashara, there's Illidan, there's all the orcs themselves, and then there's Deathwing flying around doing God knows what. So there's technically really a lot of things we could be doing.
Right. Well, I think we could continue to go down the rabbit hole here, but a lot of interesting food for thought. And if you come up with any more insane/brilliant theories, please let us know about them. We'll be happy to feature them, because I think more than it, I think this is going to be one of the more lore-heavy expansions, and a lot of people are like focusing on it or asking about it more so than in past expansions, because like Mists and Pandaria, we knew that pandas had been established in the lore, but didn't really know anything about them, so we were just kind of waiting to see what what we saw in Pandaria on the continent. So here we have an idea of what might happen, so there's a lot more anticipation about it. But I think that's enough for lore. We did have some new news to get to this week, and also a few. They're mostly Blizzard didn't really release anything brand new this week. Maybe one or two things, but most of what we knew at BlizzCon is what we still know right now. However, they did elaborate on many of the things that got announced at BlizzCon. So the first thing that caught my eye is that in the garrisons, now garrisons aren't a hunter thing, they're general game thing, but there will be a pet stable in the garrison. It's going to allow you to assign some of your pets. They didn't establish how many. Some of your pets to appear in the game world. So I know people had talked about like a pet zoo, and I think this might be a first step towards it. I didn't do farming much. I don't know if either of you did in Pandaria, but I like the idea of a garrison just because there's so much you're able to do.
I did mostly the farm, because I was trying to avoid destroying Pandaria.
Flint, did you do any farming in this expansion?
I have one farm on one of my tunes. It's a full farm, and I didn't do it till late. It's not an aspect of the game that really calls to me, and so I don't think garrisons will either.
I think garrisons might end up calling to some people only because there might be some more tangible benefits to get out of it that people won't be able to ignore. So I remember like the achievements for the different there was all the different achievements for the like holidays, and that was nice, but I wasn't really an achievement hound. And then they were giving out those faster mounts, the flying mounts, for doing all of the holiday achievements, and suddenly it was like, oh wow, this will actually save me a lot of time. So then it became something that I wanted to do because there was a tangible reward.
Right.
So that may be something with that there. We talked a little bit last week about the different raid difficulties. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen this, Flint. With they're essentially getting rid of flex level, and they're making normal and heroic flex capable. And then there's a new level called Mythic, and it's only for 20 man. It's not 10 man. It's not 25 man. It's only going to be for 20 man. There was some skepticism. What were your initial thoughts when you saw this?
I don't think it's going to work, and here's the reason why I don't think it's going to work. First, Mythic is supposed to be harder than Heroic, so it's going to be for high-end raiders only.
Right.
Is my understanding. So those high-end raiders, right now, a top-level guild, and when you talk to Roger next week, I'm sure he'll, expand on this a little more than I can. High-end raiders usually have 30 hardcore raiders there, and they have 5 sitting in reserve and 25 in, and as they have to move people in and out per boss fight in order to, min-max that fight. How are you going to do that when you got 30 people and only 20 people in there? It's going to make it a lot harder. A lot of guys are going to feel. I think it's going to break guilds. I think guilds are going to break up because there's already a lot of competition at that level anyway, and people wanting to get in.
Yeah.
And, like in Kata, we've seen hunters get put on the shelf for a while, and then finally moved back in as they kind of fixed hunters a little bit. So I think that's what's going to happen here is the most broken players, not players but classes, the classes that aren't on par with the rest. In every expansion we see that. I think they're going to be set aside and permanently set aside, as opposed to once they get better brought back in, because that's going to be your 5 you've already set out to get down to your 25 to have people to move in and out.
Sure.
Does that make sense? I think they're going in the wrong direction with that. I think what they should have did is actually talk to the top tier guilds and find out exactly how they want to go forward with something bigger.
Yeah. Well, Blizzard did come out with some justifications for the 20-man raid, saying that, and I don't necessarily agree with each of their points, but they do have a couple that might make the transition a little bit easier. The first thing that they said was, this is coming with an expansion. Historically, expansions have always been a volatile time for guild rosters, also a great time for recruitment. So when everyone's gear is suddenly equalized, the pool of potential recruits swells dramatically. It's also a time when friends or former players or guildmates are returning to the game, so it might be a nice time to sort of reconfigure raid sizes. They also said on a similar note they're continuing to roll out connected realms, which we haven't really talked too much about this on the show, but that's something they're doing so that different servers are more populated and you have access to more raiders. So there's more potential recruitment. So they're basically just they're merging existing realms into one another. And they did say, while 10-player guilds who want to do Mythic will need to pick up an extra 10, current 25-player guilds will need to shed some. That's yet another thing that will lead into a higher pool of potential recruits. So they're saying that like people leaving 25-man guilds is going to provide recruitment for 10-man guilds, which, I don't know. It sounds like if you're with a guild that you enjoy running with, why would you want to leave for a different one? You know, that doesn't seem, like you said, if they have 30, you know, and you're shedding 5 of those, you know, wouldn't you rather just keep those 30 if you have a good core group? So I don't know that all of these justifications hold up. I think the other thing is that a lot of guilds won't start at Mythic. Like the absolute world first type will. You know, Roger Brown and Method, they're going to be jumping into Mythic pretty darn early. But there's a lot of guilds that are going to start in normal or start in heroic that are still competitive, but at the next level down from those world first guilds, and they're going to have 25 players doing that at heroic level, and then they're going to get to where they might have 27 or 28, so they have some reserves and subs and things, because you always need a few more with pretty much any guild. And then, okay, we're done with this, let's go on to Mythic here, and they might be a month behind the world first guilds, but they're still trying it. And now they have this problem because they have a 25-man raid team, or 27 or 28 or however many, and suddenly they're having to cut to 20. So I don't think Blizzard thought this all the way through. They did say that 20-man was a balancing thing where the raid encounters, they were able to make them, I forget the exact wording, but it was basically like we were able to balance these the best for 20 men. That's what made the most sense in terms of like fight mechanics and balancing and stuff. And we have to take them at their word for that. They know more about that than we ever will. But in terms of shaking up guilds, I think you're absolutely right that I don't know that what they're saying here about recruitment and shuffling is going to be enough for some guilds. I think there's going to be a lot of upset players.
I think when we've talked with raiders before, like Riparian and people like that of that level, they don't have just the one alt. They have, like, maybe for this fight I need to bring my hunter, maybe for the next fight I need to bring my priest.
Sure.
So, in a way, it's not that you are going to get kicked out just because your hunter has now been nerfed, you know. You'll still be there, you'll just be there on, you know, maybe your warlock or something else.
True, but you might be getting kicked out because suddenly you only need a pool of 25 with 5 in reserve instead of 30 with 5 in reserve. You know, so that may
and
be...
not just that, because if you are getting benched a lot, you don't want to be benched. You want to be out there, so you might just leave of your own accord to go to a new one that will, like, use you.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think anyone who's dedicated enough is going to find a raid situation that they're happy with. But I also don't see why you should want to shake things up with people that are happy when, you know, maybe it's not necessary. So I don't necessarily like this. It's not going to affect me. Like, I don't think I'm going to be Mythic raiding anytime soon. But, you know, we're talking about players in general here, not even just hunters at this point. So hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it starts up and everyone says, oh, we thought the sky was falling, but everything's okay. You know, hopefully people are able to transition into it more easily than we suspect. But if I had to guess, I would say there's going to be a lot of people that continue to be upset even once we sort of get used to the different difficulty levels.
Yeah, that's kind of my assumption. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, so we'll see. But that was some big news because there was a lot of people saying the same things that we were. So that was Blizzard's sort of answer to that. The other news that I thought was maybe pertinent that we hadn't known last time at this week was that flying is being delayed until the first major patch, and I don't think that's. I mean, that's something I think they've done with a lot of different things, so that people can see the world and not just hover over it. So, it'll take us longer to get places, but I see the reasoning behind it. They want us to be able to experience the zones that they're creating. So, well, that brings us back to, now we had there was some other general news. I don't mean to go over everything from BlizzCon, and if there's anything else you guys think of, you're welcome to bring it up. But, Flint, I wanted to get your take on our hunter abilities, our level 100 hunter abilities. Now, we talked about these briefly last week, and it's really the biggest hunter news that we've had. Everything else has been very general. So there have been small things here and there about specific classes, but the biggest thing that most classes have right now, specific to them, is the level 100 talents. I'm a pretty big fan of all of them, and I've heard some dissenting opinions. I've heard some other opinions of people who enjoy it for different reasons. But I wanted to get your take on what you thought about these, and we'll get into the details again here in a second for people who maybe missed last week's show. But what were your reactions when you saw these talents? Thinking about how they're going to affect us.
Well, okay. I'll take them one by one. Bolo shot. Isn't that just what explosive shot used to be and still should be?
Arguably, sure. Now this is replacing arcane shot, so
right.
It ticks for a certain amount. Well, actually, yeah, it doesn't have. It hits for a certain amount of fire damage, and then an additional fire damage to enemies within 5 yards. So there's an AOE aspect to the ability. So. Yeah, it's a valid point, and this will be something that you could use in conjunction with. You might just have a lot of exploding things.
Right, but I remember explosive shot hitting multiple targets at one time, or you get glyph for it.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, it just seems like it's explosive shot all over again. And same thing with snipe. Just seems like the old during Kata, Kata and Wrath, what aim shot used to be. Can't move when casting it, long cast time, bonus damage.
Right.
So it just seems like they're just rehashing the way old abilities used to be, calling them something else.
Right. I see your point with Bolo. That's just stepping back to it for a second, because it, especially something that's named explosive shot, you might imply that, but that's not necessarily what it does anymore. The thing about this that I do like, and the primary reason that I like these, even if it's a little bit of a rehash, is that since it's replacing arcane shot, it's not adding another button to our rotation, which I think is a big deal right now with as many things as we have going on anyway, and the button bloat that we started to experience in Mists of Pandaria. So that aspect of it I like, that it's replacing something else, that it's giving us an upgraded version of, in this case, arcane shot. And with Snipe's case, it's an upgraded version of either steady shot or cobra shot. So that element I enjoy, but I see your point, and I actually hadn't thought of. I thought of bullet shot as, it's kind of like a explosive. I hadn't thought of snipe as like aimed shot, but you're absolutely right. It's very similar in how it works.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that replacing buttons, because we do have way too many insane button bloat, I think it's a great idea, and I think that a lot of people used to love the way explosive shot used to be. Loved it. And when they got away from it, people were kind of upset. And so now that they're going back, I think basically it's just going to me, it's, again, I think it's really Explosive Shot Part 2. I think it's really a good idea. I think those two are a good idea. The last talent, I really got some questions on that one. That one's the one that scares me the most, with or without you. I love the fact that it looks like melee hunters. I love that, because you know me, I was all for a melee hunter. It was part of one of my things. I think this is really going to do that, really help with that, and maybe that's where they're going to be, which brings me some questions, though. So the questions that pop into my head is, if you don't have a pet, what happens to Link's Rush, Blink Strike, and Fervor? It seems like those are done talents if you
Yeah.
don't have a pet out. But what I was also thinking, without a pet, maybe when they change marksmanship or survival or whatever into a melee thing, it will actually bring. We've been talking about on the Warcraft 100 Union website. You've been talking about different aspects and the way aspects could change or should change. Why can't buffs be aspects now? Just make the aspects the buffs we get from pets.
Yeah, or maybe bake it into that talent where we get a certain, we can bring a certain buff or have that ability in marksman or survival. That was one of the big criticisms or questions, maybe not criticisms because we don't know how it's going to be handled yet, but questions coming out of this talent. And I don't think we thought about this last week, is what happens to those buffs, because especially in a 10-man raid setting, we're almost always going to be asked to bring a buff. You know, there's always something we could be bringing, unless you have a really well-balanced raid group. Now, they've always sort of shuffled buffs around in expansions as well, so I don't expect the number of buffs available to remain exactly the same, and it might actually go down, because that's also not without precedent. We've seen the number of buffs get smaller in the last couple expansions, but there's still a lot of situations where we want that pet buff. And if we want to take this talent for increased DPS, but we lose that buff, you know, how is that good? So that is something I think they're going to have to, we're going to want to talk about more, maybe hopefully bring up with Blizzard, you know, us or the rest of the community, and hopefully something that they're aware of and have a plan for, because you're right. No, it could be baked into aspects. That's one possibility. So I hadn't really thought of it too much, though, but it's definitely something I think they're going to need to look at.
Right. I mean, and I think that part of what makes a hunter is the aspects. I mean, it's always been, you know, you have aspect of the days, you have aspect of, and as everybody was really upset when Eyes of the Beast went away. Maybe this is a way of bringing it back also.
Yeah, it could be. What was I going to say? Oh, you were mentioning, so okay, melee hunters. Now you say melee hunters and like, yay, melee hunters, and I guarantee you there's some people listening, or if they see those words written, who are going, oh my God, no, hunters are a ranged class. What are you saying? But I'm gonna back you up on this, because my whole thing with spec differentiation wasn't necessarily we should have a melee spec, or we should have a tanking spec, or we should have a, but the overarching idea was we should have specs that feel very different from one another. However they want to do that, I'm probably going to be okay with it, because I don't want specs that feel same-ish. I want each one to feel unique, and I want them to have interesting roles, so that it doesn't feel like I can pick one spec and just use it for everything, which at times, especially in Mist of Pandaria, was the case with Beastmaster. It's not always been Beastmaster. Sometimes in past expansions it's been others, but that seems to have been the case a lot of the time. So we saw a hunter without a pet in the launch video for Warlords of Draenor, and we also saw a hunter using a sword, which suggests that maybe something like that is coming back. And so I like the idea that maybe they're adding some melee abilities, because of course we don't have our built-in tank for soloing, so they probably have to add a couple abilities like that to, say, a survival hunter, to replace that if we're doing something without our pet with that ability. Even in raids, of course, that's largely not the case, because you have tanks and healers doing those other things. But I think we'll start to see some of this differentiation. I think getting rid of the pet is a surprising way to initiate some of those changes, but there's some exciting stuff they can do with marksman and survival. I wouldn't expect to see a spec called marksmanship become melee in any sense of the word, but I think there's some potential for that with survival, and I think whatever they do, as long as it feels different, I think it'll be a good change.
Well, you and I had this
different.
conversation a long time ago. Yeah, well, here's Arthur. When Arthur and I had this conversation when he was starting his little project, and I wrote a
project.
Okay, his huge undertaking that has engulfed his life. But when we started talking about it, I had my thoughts, and we talked about those thoughts. I thought that Beast Mastery should be a very, very pet-heavy spec. It should be most of the damage coming from a pet, and instead of having Cobra Shot and Steady Shot and all these different shots that the hunter did, he actually he controlled his pet. So he stood back, he fired his bow, and then your buttons were pet commands for this or that or the other thing. That's what I thought. And then I wanted to go into marksman being extremely bow focused or gun focused, being just the ultimate ranged class. Stand back, fire your bow. You have a pet, he does some damage, not a lot, or you don't have a pet. So that way. And then survival be a melee / ranged class, and by that I mean melee for traps. You drop your traps, you still have a sword, but you still have your bow like we used to have, and then you can still do your normal shots, but most of your damage comes from shots. Comes from the actual traps, and because being a hunter is part of its traps. Now, again, this would be an extreme idea that Blizzard's never going to listen to me on.
Yeah, well, when you said, so you mentioning, okay, Beastmaster should be a lot of pet damage. That's kind of something that we're going to be able to do, because this with or without you talent, if you take the Beastmastery version of it, we get a large boost to our pets. It's not a massive boost to their base damage, but they get basically all the abilities that your pet used to get in the different specs. So whether it was I'm having a brain fart here. Ferocity, tenacity, or cunning. You get pretty much all of the major ones from all three of those when you take this for your pet. So your pet's gonna be a monster, and I would be surprised if it wasn't providing more than half your damage. So we're definitely seeing the potential for that. And while it might be interesting and tricky to implement melee hunters, given how much of a range class we've been, that's something that they might do with survival. You aren't the only one to suggest that marksmen become very focused on ranged and physical damage and bows and guns and crossbows. When we had BRK on the show a few weeks ago, he said something similar, and his ideas about marksmen kind of followed that same trend. He wanted exotic weapons for marksmanship. We went into that at length. It was more than just that, but that was a big idea that he had, that he wanted to see, to sort of focus marksmanship on that. So you're not the only one out there that's thinking stuff like this. I think melee would be the most controversial, but again, if it's executed well, that's the big thing with all of this. Can they execute it in a way that's balanced and fun and feels unique without being, without stopping it feeling like a hunter? So as long as we still have all of those elements there, I think that is a valid way that they could go with it. So we'll see. But this is definitely the most interesting of the three abilities. The other two are more, here's a nice boost to one of your existing shots. We're replacing it with something cooler, ready, go. But this one is really going to change how we play, I think, and could change how they treat the different specs.
Right.
So,
yeah. And again, it's I'm a player and not a dev, so.
Right. They do know things that we don't, but they are very good about listening to. They are very good about listening to feedback. So, and we appreciate that. We always appreciate that. And, we did get Ghostcrawler, and the devs did read the Hunter project, so it included a lot of different ideas from a lot of different hunters. And I tried to weed out the ones that would have been the least feasible to include the ones that had the most chance of getting included. So, stuff like this, a lot of these things are not exactly what we proposed in the Hunter project, but like one of the suggestions was upgrades to shots, and snipe and bullet shot are essentially upgrades to shots. It's not exactly as it was envisioned in the Hunter project, but it's a very similar idea, and that was one of the suggestions to avoid button bloat. So whether or not that came about as part of the Hunter project, it's probably something that they had in mind already, but they certainly are thinking about some of the same issues that we are and trying to find solutions for them. So, yeah, there'll probably be a lot more. I do want to find out what happens to pet buffs. I do want to find out what's happening to aspects. There's still a lot of questions I have about the class moving forward that we don't know right now. So it's all largely positive at this point, but there's still a lot more there's still a lot more to discover that we don't know at the moment. And hopefully we get a steady stream of information as we get toward Warlords of Draenor. So,
did they say when Warlords of Draenor is expected to be out? Is it more fourth quarter or third quarter, maybe?
I haven't heard anything, to be honest with you.
I was wondering because
yeah, Blizzard.
I know they want to get it out as soon as possible because they don't want people to finish the current raids and then just kind of fade away into other games for a while.
Which has happened in the past.
Oh yeah, it will happen, which is why I'm thinking that they'll want to rush the beta out as soon as possible, and the sooner that gets out, the sooner we'll actually be playing it, which is what they really want.
Yeah, the general trend is to be quicker patch releases, quicker expansion releases than there's been in the past. The gap between all of this is less than it used to be. Between BC and Wrath, or Wrath and Kata, there was a lot of time between those relative to what it was since then. So I think we will see things sooner rather than later, but we also know that Blizzard has an unofficial policy of it's ready when it's ready. So they're very sketchy until they absolutely know. They're very sketchy with release dates because they don't want to promise something and not have a product that they're happy with. And of course, they have the cash to be able to say things like that. Not all studios do, which is good. I think we don't want an unfinished product. But I know they've been reluctant to have release dates early on, so hopefully we hear more about that. But I haven't seen anything.
Synth Paradox says WoW Insider put a guess at July, and I tend to kind of agree with that because I don't know what the latest subscriber numbers is, like maybe 8 million. That will go up, but it will also go down. And if they hit 5 million, the pressure to get that expansion out as soon as possible. Yeah, they have the money, but they really can't afford to lose more people.
That's true. The loss of players kind of plateaued. So the most recent quarterly statement, there was a very, very small drop compared to the big drop that we saw. When was it? Was it around the beginning of the expansion, or maybe the second patch, or somewhere in there? But anyway, it's sort of leveled off. I think they're at like 7.6 million. I want to say it's somewhere in there. But that was a drop off of like over 10 million at the launch of Mists of Pandaria. So
yeah, and right now there's still people doing the raiding and Timeless Isles and gearing up and all that, but that won't hold for long. And then they got the holidays coming up as well, so that'll take a lot of people away.
Yeah. One thing that Ali mentioned as well here in the show notes, I did catch this, that was Hunter specific and I missed this week, is at the sound panel at BlizzCon, where they were talking about the sounds that they're going to implement. And there's a lot of cool stuff that they're doing with the sound that I'm excited about. They're really expanding on the sounds of the game in ways that will seem organic and not annoying and not repetitive in many cases too. But they said they are going to be redoing Hunter sound effects almost entirely. And one of the big things was they realized that people were transmogging their guns to bows because they were annoyed with the gun sounds. So they went in and they realized that the gun sound was actually pretty obnoxious. And I'm not gonna dispute that. I think if Frostheim were here, he'd be against that particular point. But I'm not going to dispute that. So they decided that the gun sound was pretty terrible. So they're going to be redoing weapon sounds altogether, it seems like, and especially gun sounds in particular, so that hopefully people don't have to transmog away because they're annoyed by a sound.
Yeah, the new sounds I kind of hated worse, to be honest. But, I'm not a person for change. I do like the bow sound, the old bow sound.
Yeah.
But the old gun sound's not that bad. I'm used to it after all these years.
Yeah, once you get used to something, it's really okay. But I can understand people's annoyance with it. So we did have we have a couple questions here that I wanted to get to before we do the outro, and one of them I feel like is something that Flint could really touch on. This is from Faramus. Said, with the WOD trailer showing a melee hunter, does this mean we're going back to the way hunters were pre-Kata with Wingclip and Mongoose, or will Blizzard make a more ranger-style like character from AD&D? You guys mentioned last week that maybe non-BM spec hunters wouldn't have pets. Well, you'll have the option not to have a pet as non-BM, so that is one of the level 100 talents called with or without you that we were discussing just a little bit earlier. So you'll have the option not to have a pet, and that'll give you a boost to your hunter DPS. And one of the ways they could take it, especially with survival, is giving us some melee abilities. Flint, I used your, I'm going to try to pull it up here, I used your sort of template for what a melee hunter could look like and could be in the Hunter Project as an example of what they might be able to do. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see, maybe not how it will happen, but one way they could do it and what type of change we might see.
Well, I think they could bring back kind of the old melee abilities hunters used to have. We had some pretty good abilities. We had Wing Clip and Counter Strike, but they could bring all those back and just kind of add to those and actually get rid of the ranged abilities. If you take that, for survival, you take Lone Wolf for survival, without you, and do that, then you could actually be pretty easy to turn it into a melee class. And I know some people have said, well, why not just play a rogue? Well, you're still not a rogue because
we still have traps. We still have and it's not necessarily going to be getting rid of a ranged weapon. There might be some sort of hybrid where we have these different options. Maybe we're in at melee, but we no longer have a min range. So there is different ways they could handle it. I don't think there's a single way that, and I don't think we would necessarily become rogues, which sounds, we'd still have a lot of the bells and whistles that hunters have that rogues don't. So I'm looking at what you originally wrote here. What you originally sent to me that I then put in the Hunter Project. So a melee heavy hunter with traps. So there'd be maybe a bigger emphasis on traps as well, especially if you're at melee range more often than not. Less emphasis on pet DPS. So things like Raptor Strike, Wing Clip, Mongoose Bite. I think you added a couple potential abilities too, so we could see some new abilities come out of this. So it was called Gut, which is basically a kill shot. You attempt to finish a wounded target by gutting, causing 420% weapon damage. Gut can only be used on enemies that have 20% health or less. So, I mean, these were just ideas thrown out. It's not necessarily what we're going to see, but you could see how you could place a bigger emphasis on traps. So increase the damage or increase the radius or the abilities of traps for a survival hunter. That's always been something that survival's been about, and maybe just make that even a bigger deal so that traps are in our rotation. That could be an aspect of it. So you said aspects are a big part of the hunter class. So are traps. That's always been something that differentiates us from other classes as well, and some of the things they can do. Right. Being ranged physical DPS, having the best pets in the game, being our own built-in tank and DPS, that sort of thing. So there's various things that differentiate us from the other classes, and traps were always one of them. So they could really play that up. So taking the abilities that we've had in the past, maybe adding a couple others, maybe they still include a couple ranged things, maybe they place a bigger emphasis on traps. There's different ways that they could handle this that I think would be, that could be balanced and could also be true to a hunter class. So I don't want it, and the question mentioned ranger-style character from AD&D, and that's an excellent point because it's not necessarily going to stay, and maybe it will, who knows, maybe we're just going to stay ranged, but we could think of it as more of a ranger tracker type style. That would fit into the hunter idiom. Hunters aren't just ranged archers or ranged gunmen. That's what that's a lot of what we've been in WoW, but within sort of a larger fantasy canon, there's a larger definition for the term hunter that can include things like this. So I think they can stay true to the style and flavor of the class, and without sacrificing too much and turning us into rogues, essentially.
Right, yeah, I just don't remember what the abilities. I wrote up a bunch of abilities. I remember that. I know I had Immolation Trap and Explosive Trap, one being single target, one being
Sure,
AoE.
yeah, right.
You know,
And like I said, like that would make a lot of sense being part of. We've had sort of trap dancing as part of our rotation, unofficial rotation sometimes in the past, especially in survival when it could, when traps used to be able to trigger Black Arrow. So it's not something we're unfamiliar with. And if they just kind of pushed it a little bit more in that direction, we could get a very different feel for the class without leaving what makes us unique.
right.
So that's the key. A lot of this is still somewhat speculative, but there's reason to believe that we may see some of this, like the melee hunter in the video, like this ability where our pets are gone. So I think we're moving in that direction. And if not, we're still going to get something unique, even if it doesn't play out exactly how we're envisioning it here. But I was going to say something else, but I forget.
There was one other thing they said at the panel. It's not specifically hunter related, but it occurred to me over this past week because I've been going back listening to a lot of BlizzCon stuff. But they said that they apologized for bringing the entire server population to one zone on Courage to Silithus when they opened the gates to Encourage, and how the server managers kind of were upset about that and everybody crashed. I mean, that's legendary.
Yeah.
But you think about it, whenever they do launch an expansion, like when they launched Kata, if you remember that first night when we all did the trying the little frost time,
Yeah.
they can do that now, because
that still wasn't like
everybody was there.
Yeah, well, the first it was bugged though. It wasn't even like that.
Oh no, it was barely playable.
Yeah,
at
when you were in
best.
the airship, it wasn't even about the lag because of all the people trying to do the same two quests. Like the quest itself was bugged, so we ended up like parachuting off the gunship, ignoring those quests and just going exploring. Yeah, it was a little bit of a mess.
But we didn't crash. They've kind of solved that problem of putting the entire server
That's true.
in one place.
There was no server crash. I mean, it was slow. I'm sure some systems were just going abysmally slow, but yeah, we did not crash. So I guess if they handled it correctly, but it still must be a nightmare. It still
But
has
at least
to be
the
a
one
nightmare.
that they're expecting now. So it just occurred to me about that
At the launch of Wrath, you had two different zones you could start at, and half the people started in one zone and half the people started at another zone.
Mm-hmm.
I think that worked really well.
Yeah, we had that in. Well, wait, which was it?
That was Wrath.
Okay. Oh, it was. Sorry, it was Pandaria where we had the flying gunship and we were trying to level Frost. Yeah. In Kata there was two you could go to as well. There was the underwater zone and there was Hyjal. And yeah, that worked out okay because the first 4 or 5 the first quest hub is a nightmare because everyone's trying to do the same quest, but you do eventually branch out, and it sort of gets spaced out a little bit better. So I don't think there's an ideal way to handle that, but you're right that they probably have the technology now to just have an entire server. It still wasn't too long ago. It had to have been during Kata that we crashed the server with the WHU guild when we went to raid Thunderbluff, right?
I think that was during Kata.
It had to have been during Kata.
Yeah, because we crashed. Ironforge.
That was, I mean, outside
we had
of
300 hunters there.
Plus our pets and our companion pets.
Yep.
We rock.
Outside of killing Garrosh, I feel like that was maybe the coolest achievement of the WHU guild, because not only did we got back in eventually and we killed Cairn, but yeah, we just completely crushed the server. It wasn't It wasn't just Thunderbluff, like it went down because of the WHU guild.
Yeah, we took that login server down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was
cool.
wonderful. That was wonderful.
All the things that WHU has done, the only time we ever failed is when we went after another hunter.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the irony is not lost. And Michelle Morrow loves reminding us of that. I remember her cackle the first time we brought that up and she was on the show. It was it was a special moment.
Yeah, she
That
was in
fun.
vet with us
I mean,
when it
I
happened,
texted
too.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't.
Because I
like,
texted her that it was going on, and she didn't know, and so she grabbed her computer and got on and got in bed with us, and she's like, Frostine, what are you doing?
Right,
I'm
yeah,
like,
because she had the vent channel, because she would show up for these. I remember her being on some of the, and like she got a bunch of tweets and texts and stuff, and it wasn't just you. I know you did text her, but like a bunch of people were sending her tweets. It just exploded all at once, and she showed up going, "What the hell is going on?" But yeah, we got crushed by Sylvana. It was a mixture of things, because you get a bunch of Alliance players, some of whom probably have Horde tunes, but many of whom probably have never played Horde. You throw them into Undercity, which, let's be honest, is a really confusing city if you've never been in it. And
yes.
you
and
ask
then you
them.
go down that tunnel of
Yeah.
death.
So by the time we got there, we were operating at like 40%. There was a lot of people were just wandering Undercity. And she
the
had.
graveyard is so far away for Alliance.
Oh, it is. It's wicked far. But the thing that actually killed us was the fact that she had that spread shot. It was basically a multi-shot, but it didn't have. We were too low level, so we were getting one shot by it, and it didn't have a cap on how many people it could hit. So she was just annihilating us with this multi-shot. There was nothing we could do. That was the ability that effectively ended that attempt.
Yeah, we were 80 at that time. We weren't even 85. We were 80.
Well, okay, it was 80, but it was Cataclysm, so we were 5 levels below endgame at the time. But
Yeah.
Not everyone was, mind you, but a fair number of us were. So yeah,
Rezzing in that tunnel with the guards repopping, that was fun.
Yeah, that was definitely like only failure. Our only failure was that.
Yeah.
I mean, we took down everybody else we went after. I mean, we took down
World Dragons,
everybody.
like city leaders.
Garage.
Yeah.
We took down World Dragons at level 1.
Well,
okay, level 2 or 3.
Well,
Because most people leveled on the way
here's
there.
the thing. Flint, were you at the very first? Were you at the very first? Okay. I hate to break the spell here, but here's what happened that day. We had a bunch of level 1 hunters, and yeah, just from like wandering around and exploring, a few got to level 2. However, when we got to the dragon itself, I'm convinced we could have beaten it as all level 1s, but we didn't actually beat it as all level 1s. We had an endgame hunter show up at that time who was tanking it for us. And I think like Frostheim was there with his main, just auto-shotting or something, single-handedly doing more DPS than 100 level 1s were doing. So I feel, because the graveyard wasn't too far away, and we kept running back, and it didn't have a massive AoE, so it couldn't like kill us all at once. So I feel like eventually we could have done it, but with the number of misses, it would have taken us like 5 hours to do it. So that particular achievement wasn't entirely level 1s. However, as level like 5s, 10s, whatever, 20s, we did kill things that we had no business killing later on in the game, and those were all legitimate. But the first one was, we did cheat a little bit. So I hate to ruin the illusion there, but
Well, that's because we didn't know at the time just if it was even possible.
right.
And then we found
that's
out
true.
that it was, and it just snowballed from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the next time we went back to a World Dragon, we were at least level 10, but there was no help, and we just crushed it. So it's reasonable to suspect that we may have been able to do it as level 1s. It just would have taken a lot longer than what we had.
And then Whale Shark went down pretty easy.
Yeah, the whale shark. I remember that one.
When we did the demons in Outland, that was a good one.
There was pirates versus ninjas.
There was us versus Frostheim and what was that tank's name?
The rage tank.
Yeah, I mean that was fun.
I've raided with this idiot. What's his name again?
It's
Chris.
Ara,
Chris.
right?
Chris.
Chris.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to call him an
Yeah.
idiot. He's a cool guy and actually a pretty good player.
Yeah, I've raided with him too when I was in that guild.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. He mellowed. He turned into a healer. So now we're just sort of this sounds like post show material. So
Yeah. Sorry.
So as the unofficial like curator of this episode, I'm gonna have us do the outro now. But
You have been listening to episode 190.
that's my line.
You didn't change it. We're not episode 193.
I couldn't. I don't have permission on this account. I tried.
You have been listening to episode 194 of the Hunting Party Podcast.
I'm Arth from the Warcraft Hunters Union.
I'm not Dark Brew. I'm Flint from
And I'm Molly
WHU.
Saunders. And I'm Molly Saunders, screwing things up as best I can.
Yep. Check us out on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or at our RSS feed to your reader. Links are available in the show notes. And if you like us, see how I didn't leave a pause there for Ali to interrupt me? Please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes or YouTube, especially one where you tell us how much warlocks need nerfed.
You can submit a title for this week's show by emailing us at huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com and have your name mangled on air by melee hunters.
Stay thirsty, my friends, and remember to drink your dark brew lager.
For the Horde.
And nerf Canada.
For the Alliance.
Not for the Alliance.
Silly elf.
Lokar Ogar.
For the Alliance just doesn't have the ring.
No, it really doesn't.
I did try last week, though, with the Chris Metzen. With
Right.
Chris Metzen line.
Yeah, absolutely.
He can carry it off.
Yes, Lakey, we are getting close to episode 200. We have some exciting things planned for that. So I'm gonna wait for Dark Brew to get back before we make any official announcements about stuff. But we're pushing towards that, so it should happen. We're probably gonna miss a couple around the holidays, so it should be sometime in like early to mid January. We're thinking episode 200 will happen. So, but thanks for coming on the show, Flint. It was cool having you on.
Anytime you want me back, dude, I'll be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, this is the first week without any of the original hosts. So, and although I mean, Ali's been around since forever, so I don't want to not count you in on that.
Yeah, but for the longest time, I didn't say anything.
Right.
So it has been a long time though, and I'm gonna miss the show. So.
Yeah, but yeah, Dark Brew will be back in a couple weeks. We are gonna have some people on next week. And I'm not 100% sure who or what, but it won't just be me and Ali. So we'll have some more fun. We'll probably have some more stuff to talk about. But yeah, thanks as always to the chat room for stopping by.
A life stealer, that's just the cost of being an awesome sauce. I'm a dues payer, a boss slayer. I rock out with my lockout now. Viper to cheetah to dragon hawk. No time to waste, cause I can jump shot. BM, MM, and SV. I can rock out any tree. Never worried about my threat, cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, cause I am hit capped. Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter and not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top the meters every fight. Lady and cave dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Gil'jadan, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnaros. Which one have we killed the most? Kel'Thuzad to Malygos. We even killed a Kama's ghost. Feels like we're getting close, all that running as a ghost. Yogg-Saron, Thorian, Sartharian, Megthuridon, Sapuron, Lucifer to Sulfuron, Archon, Amalon, Coromon, Turn